Hi, my favorite friends. It's Miss Miranda here and Nazi. And tonight we are going to be learning all about Helen Keller. The title of our story tonight is called I Am Helen Keller. It's written by Brad Meltzer and illustrated by Christopher Eliopoulos. And it's one of our favorite series that we read in our classroom. It's called Ordinary People Change the World, where we get to learn about all these awesome people and how they had a huge impact on the world. We are still in Women's History Month, so we're still looking at influential women. And today on Zoom, I got to talk to some of my own scholars, and they shared with me some schema that they already knew about Helen Keller. So they shared that they knew that she was deaf, which means that she can't hear, and also that she was blind, which means that she wasn't able to see. And they knew that she had siblings. And the last piece, our scholar Kaylin shared with us that she knew that Helen had a really influential teacher in her life who changed her life forever. That teacher's name is Anne Sullivan, and we're going to learn about Anne and Helen tonight. So let's get started. I am Helen Keller. When I was little, I was just like you. I loved to play, I loved my dog, and I loved seeing all the bright, beautiful flowers. I also loved copying people. At 6 months old, I could already say, "Howdy, howdy yourself, T. Did she just ask for tea? How'd she do that? What can I say? There's no stopping her." On the day I turned 1, I started walking. Oh, and there was another word I always loved. Wah, wah. Here's your water, my mom said. Just like any other kid, right? But there's one thing that made me different. When I was 19 months old, I got very sick. The doctor said I wouldn't live. I did live, but unfortunately that sickness made me blind and deaf. This is how I see the world. Close your eyes and block your ears. I couldn't see anything or hear anything. That's right, nothing. And readers, I want you to take a moment to imagine what life was like for Helen Keller. So go ahead and close your eyes and plug your ears and just take a moment to imagine what it would be like to live in a world where you couldn't see or hear anything. Imagine how Helen might feel. I know it seems really scary. It was scary for me too. Back then, people didn't know how to deal with someone who was deaf and blind. Even my relatives, her family members, thought she was a monster. You see the way she behaves? She put her hand in my plate. She ate my food. Wah, 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 wah. And in the picture, she's kind of hitting the other plates. And her mom says, no, she's just trying to find her water. She threw the silverware too. She's so poorly behaved. She shouldn't even be here. They were right. I wasn't well behaved. I was extremely frustrated. In my dark world, I couldn't tell if anyone noticed me or cared about me. I couldn't see or hear what I was doing. But by the time I was 5, I'd figured out small ways to communicate. To say yes, I nodded my head. For no, I shook it from side to side. To say father, I motioned to put on his glasses. For mother, I rested my hand on my face. For my baby sister, I did this. And when I'd shiver like I was cold, it really meant Helen wants ice cream. So she started to develop kind of a code and all these signals that she would use to communicate what she was trying to say without actually using her words. But even with all those signs, I couldn't get my dog Belle to play with me. I didn't know how to speak, so I couldn't call her. I just wanted to play with my dog. The saddest part was I got used to a dark and silent world. So think about how Helen might be feeling if she wasn't able to play with her dog. She felt like her family couldn't understand her, and she was just really frustrated and having a hard time communicating because she wasn't able to speak or hear people. Imagine how frustrated she must feel. People told my parents to give up on me, that I'd never be good at anything. They didn't listen though. After reading about another blind and deaf girl, my parents found something they hadn't had since I'd gotten sick. Hope. This says there are places that teach deaf and blind children. That's what she needs. She needs a teacher. We all do. Everybody needs a teacher. Still, I had no idea what the world was about to bring me. Before she met her new teacher, she might have been feeling anxious or nervous or scared. Imagine how you felt the day before your first day of school. I never had a more important day. I was 6 years old. From the way my mother was hurrying, I knew something big was coming. I stood on the porch, waiting, feeling the sun on my face. Someone approached. I could feel footsteps. I reached out thinking it was my mother. She pulled me into her arms. Her name was Anne Sullivan. She's the teacher who changed my life forever. In one of my first lessons, she gave me a toy doll. After letting me play with it, she spelled the word doll into the palm of my hand. D-O-L-L. Can you feel the letters? D-O-L-L. I could feel them, but I didn't know what letters or words were or how they worked. That didn't stop Miss Sullivan. One day we were arguing as she was trying to teach me the words mug and water. I got so upset I took my new doll and smashed it on the ground. I got angry a lot back then. It was really hard for me. I was so frustrated. But still, even though Helen sometimes had outbursts like this, do you think that stopped Anne Sullivan from wanting to teach Helen? It didn't. Never losing her patience, my teacher took me outside. At a nearby spout, she put my hand under the running water. In my other hand, she spelled the word water, W-A-T-E-R in her hand. Then she spelled it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. She said, "You understand, don't you? You understand." And I understood. So that's kind of how Anne Sullivan began to teach Helen everything. She would have her touch something in one hand, and in the other hand, she would spell the letters into her hand so she could feel it. From there, I realized that everything had a name. Every object I touched seemed to burst to life. Mother, dog, table, lamp, father, sister, teacher. And now when I wrote words in my teacher's hand, I had someone who could understand me. When you're learning something new, it's often hard. I started with words. My vocabulary grew fast. Eventually, I learned the meaning of the word love. I had given my teacher some flowers, so she spelled into my hand, "I love Helen." Confused, I asked her, "What is love?" "It is here," she spelled while tapping at my heart. I was still confused. It was hard to understand something I couldn't touch or feel. And in our class, we've talked about abstract and concrete nouns, and we talked about the difference between a concrete noun is something you can touch, like a flower or a dog. An abstract noun is a feeling or a value that you can't touch. It's something you can only imagine, like love. So Anne had a hard time understanding what this abstract noun love meant because she couldn't actually touch it with her own hands. It made no sense. Why couldn't my teacher show me what love is? But then she explained, "You can't touch clouds, but you can feel rain and know how happy flowers are to get water. That's kind of how love is. You can't touch love, but you can feel how happy it makes you." There, in that moment, my whole world changed. It was as if there was invisible lines that stretched between me and everyone else in my life. Close your eyes. You can feel it too. Your connection to your family and your friends. That's love. Still, life was never easy. Without sight, I couldn't see people's faces. Without sound, I couldn't hear their voices. But one of my greatest breakthroughs came when I learned to do what you're doing right now, reading. Read without eyes? How's she going to do that? "You'll read with your fingers," said Anne. "On this cardboard, you'll feel raised dots. The dots make letters, and the letters make words. This is the word for doll. And that's called Braille. And a lot of my own scholars in my class and any friends who have had me already, you know my brother, my eldest brother, was born blind. And Jordy also reads with Braille too, but it's really cool. When we come back to school, if you want to borrow this book, you can actually feel it, but the author and the illustrator work together to actually put the raised dots on the page so you can feel what Braille feels like. To practice, I'd match each word with its object and make sentences. This was my favorite game. We played it for hours. See if you can find the sentence. Girl is in wardrobe. Girl is in wardrobe. So Anne started to label everything at home and then make sentences out of it with Braille. From there, I started reading real books, just like you. The only difference was my books were in Braille with the raised letters, which is a series of raised dots that you read with your fingers. Go ahead and try. So here's the part where it's actual Braille here on the page. Move your pointer finger over the dots below. At first, it just feels bumpy, right? You'll get used to it. These dots spell my name, H-E-L-E-N, Helen. Want to read your name in Braille? Here's the alphabet. Run your pointer finger over the letters. Now close your eyes. There you go. Now you're reading just like me. And it has the whole Braille alphabet here. So when we come back to school, if you want to borrow this book to feel it, you can explore and learn a little bit more about Braille. To make reading even more fun, my teacher took me outside. She knew I loved feeling the sun on my face and smelling the pine needles. I read my books so many times I wore down the raised dots. There were the Arabian Nights, Robinson Crusoe, and one of my favorites was called Little Women. In those pages, I met brave boys and girls who could hear and see. And you can make a connection if you also like to go read outside. I love to read outside. One of Miss Sullivan's best lessons came when she showed me how plants grow. Feel these buds. Some buds open fast. Other flower buds open slowly. A flower can only bloom if it's watered. When I was 9 years old, I wanted to learn how to speak. Even Miss Sullivan was worried about teaching me. She thought I'd get too frustrated. But nothing would stop me now. To help me, Miss Sullivan took me to a teacher named Sarah Fuller, who would put my hand to her face and let me feel her tongue and lips as she made each sound in her mouth. Yes, Helen, feel each sound, like the vibrating strings on a piano. In an hour, I learned the letters M, P, A, S, T, and I. And she said the word ma. Now I could call my dog, and she'd come to me. At my 7th lesson, I spoke this sentence, the one sentence that I'd repeat over and over. I am not dumb now. I think Helen had a really hard time figuring out how she could show that she was smarter and to figure out how to read and how to write. It was very challenging, very difficult. So she started to believe that she couldn't learn anything. But with the help of all these teachers and her parents who cared so much about her, she was able to feel successful and she became a reader and she was able to speak and communicate. So she repeated that sentence over and over again. I am not dumb now. She realizes she's very smart. As I got older, I didn't just learn to speak English. I learned French and German. So she speaks 3 languages and she's also able to read in Braille, which is kind of like another language. For college, I wanted to go to Radcliffe at Harvard University. Maybe she should wait another year. Deaf and blind people don't go to college. I'm going, said Helen. I wouldn't argue, said my mom. There's no stopping her. At Harvard, most of my books weren't available in Braille, so Miss Sullivan spelled out many of the textbooks in my hand. That's how much I loved learning, and that's how patient and selfless Miss Sullivan was. So notice here on this page, the person who was in charge of admissions at Harvard said, deaf and blind people don't go to college. Did that let Helen stop her from getting to college? Absolutely not. She's very persistent. I became the first deaf and blind person to earn a college degree. I wouldn't be the last. As I grew older, I wrote 14 books and visited 39 countries. But the most important thing I did was to make sure that other people with disabilities could get the same education I had. My family had the money to hire a private teacher. Not everyone is that lucky. We need to give every person an equal chance. There she is! She sounds so strong! Today, thousands of deaf and blind students enroll in universities, thanks to all the hard work that Helen did. Riding a horse? How does she do that? So Helen was also an activist who fought for children with disabilities to get an equal education and access to resources to help them get that education. That was only the beginning. I didn't just help the deaf and the blind. I started fighting for social change, to help women vote, to help the poor survive, and to help people who needed it most. She was one of the earliest supporters of the ACLU to fight for free speech. She was also a supporter of the NAACP to help Black people get equal rights as well. She met every president from Grover Cleveland to Lyndon Johnson. But let's be honest, they met her. Today, the American Foundation for the Blind and Helen Keller International continue to help the blind and also the hungry. So she was an activist for many, many people. In my life, people said I was different. They said I'd never be normal. But the truth is, there's no such thing as a normal life. Every one of us is like a flower that must be watered. Every one of us is full of potential. And every one of us can overcome obstacles. Look at me, hear my words. I may not be able to see, but I have vision. I may not be able to hear, but I have a voice. Think of your life as a hill that must be climbed. There's no correct path to get to the top. We all zigzag in our own ways. At some point you'll slip, you'll fall, you'll tumble back down again. But if you get back up and keep climbing, I promise you, you will reach the top. Don't let anything hold you back. Our lives are what we make of them. There will always be obstacles, but there will always be ways around them. I am Helen Keller, and I won't let anything stop me. And at the very end, there's a timeline of Helen's life. She was born in 1880, and she passed away in 1968. And there's a quote here that says, "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched, but just felt in your heart." Like that love and patience she felt from her teacher, Anne Sullivan. Love that. Awesome book. So readers, go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know what you learned tonight about Helen Keller. And I'll see you soon. Bye, my friends.